Welcome to Zambition, the channel on which we engage in dialogue with leaders from across sectors and generations. Greetings and welcome to Zambition. My name is Martin Kalungbanda, your host on this channel. Today, our guest is Dr. Neo Simutanyi. He is the Executive Director at the Center for Policy Studies. He specializes in public policy. After obtaining his doctorate from the University of Cambridge in the UK, Dr. Simutanyi became Research Fellow and Lecturer in Governance and African Politics at the University of Zambia. I am extremely proud at this moment because I am in dialogue with my teacher. He taught me at the University of Zambia. From him, I learned how slavery and colonialism have not ended. They have only taken a different form of manifestation. Dr. Simutanyi, welcome to Zambition.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
My first question to you, Dr. Simutanyi, is about your journey. What is the personal journey you have walked that has brought you this far?
That's a different question. I am over 60 now, and I've had a long journey. I grew up going to rural schools, walking long distances, and traveled quite extensively in my early years as a child. I've been educated in different parts of the country. At one time, rural schools in the Western Province. Then I was at a school at a mission in Chipata, Mwami. Those who know where it is located, it's actually a rural place. Went to secondary school, Eastern Province. And thereafter, of course, came to Soccer, like many of us, to the city and took an education, a privileged one, of course, at the time, because during our time, education was free. And of course, if you passed, you were assured of a place at university. There was nothing like the bursaries where there are queues and so forth. It was automatic as long as you passed. These days, people get 6 points and they don't go to university. It's strange. During our time, getting 6 points, you came out in newspaper. It was actually a very rare achievement at the time. So born of middle class, lower middle class family that was struggling. I consider myself to be privileged to actually have had an education to postgraduate level and to have had the opportunity to actually teach at the University of Zambia, one of the highest university in the country. And of course, it gives me great satisfaction. Most of my students have gone on to make an impact, like yourself, in various fields of life, of endeavor. That gives me great satisfaction. I think that's the kind of satisfaction that parents have when the children achieve something. But also, I think I've, in my own way, engaged in the politics of my country. At the very beginning of the multi-party system, we were one of the few people to actually form a political party. And I have learned a lot. I've worked with different people, and I've accumulated lots of knowledge and experience about the functioning of the political system, about the behavior of people we call political elites. And I think it is sobering because some of us see much more than others. And we get very frustrated because we know things can be better. And here we are, I think, having reached this far is also navigating, learning to navigate minefields, avoiding controversy. I have, of course, been involved in controversy at one time or another, because that's the nature of politics. There's a politics where if you are not conformist, if you don't support the establishment, then of course they will do everything to destroy you, and they can destroy you. And one has to learn to coexist. Things have become worse, I think, in my view, than they were before. And we hope that somehow we can have a new beginning. We can reconstruct a society where you don't have to fear your neighbor. You can talk and disagree in an environment where there are no reprisals. I think the country, Zambia, is now poorer than it was at independence. And it's really a bad indictment on our generation, because some of the people who are now in government, and it's quite frustrating that the optimism that we had when we were students on how we would reconstruct this country, what we would do to contribute to a future where our children and our children's children would enjoy abundance. Those things didn't happen. If you go to rural areas today, people are starving. The sharing which was there before, see, previously, if you're in a village, everyone can bring you something. There was sharing, what Nyerere talked about, that the communalism of the rural setting. It was natural, because people actually had abundance. They could share. Now it's not possible. These days, people have to call you when you're in town to ask for money, to ask money for food, and so forth. That's where we are. And yet, this country, because Zambia, is so well endowed in resources. We are quite rich, that if we turned our natural resources to wealth, would be much more prosperous even than countries like South Africa that we always admire.
So, Dr. Simutanyi,
Yes,
when you describe where we are coming from in the way you have done, you are at the same time inviting the notion of transformation. And in a way, I am recalling some of your thoughts in the lectures I attended from you, that in any transformation, something needs to die as something else is being born. Where do you see a Zambia that is dying? And where are you seeing a Zambia that is wanting to be born?
you're a philosopher, Martin, and you ask philosophical questions. But I can break down that this way, that transformation involves two processes. To construct something new, you have to have what I call a revolutionary moment. A revolutionary moment is where you have a combination of objective conditions and subjective factors. Objective conditions is where everyone accepts that actually things should change. You know, things definitely are not, cannot remain like this. That is the objective factor. When you share the fact that you do something needs to give, when that is widely shared, like it was the case in 1991, but the subjective factors are that people should be aware that they themselves can bring about a change. So to know that the need for change is one thing, to bring it about another. So we are at a situation where we all want transformation. We all want change, but we don't know who is to bring that change. We don't know that we ourselves should be part of that change. So we are not yet convinced. We don't have a critical mass that is convinced that change is needed and needed now. Not that. In 1991, we did not only agree that Kaunda and UNIP should go. We also agreed that we ourselves should kick them out. So you saw a mass movement of people all willing, regardless of repercussions, to actually bring about change. Now we are at a stage where we have changed, we have political change, we have multi-parties and all these things, which of course are not working. We also know that. The content of our democracy is actually very shallow. But we're not convinced that we can bring about the transformation. And by transformation is an economy that serves everybody. The economy where everybody shares. That's a transformation, you know, to move away from only thinking about myself to thinking about the other person. That's why we're not moved. So until that happens, and of course, the challenge is on all of us to bring it about. But this is, when you talk of countries like the United Kingdom and elsewhere, you can see that the leadership of those countries are not thinking about themselves, not thinking about the term of office. They are thinking about what they will leave behind. They are only making a contribution, but they want to make a contribution, an impact, that they will say they made a contribution. The East Asian countries, for example, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and so forth, they actually constructed economies that will stand the test of time. Because South Korea was behind Zambia in 1964. Malaysia was behind Zambia in 1964. Where are those countries today? Those are mortals, they're human beings, they die and like us. But they told themselves that they can actually change the society, and they did. So there's no excuse that after 56 years of independence, we are marking time. We are at the same position. A few things here, a few changes here and there. But on the whole, the quality of life of the majority of Zambians have not changed. Why we are still where we are. And I think the reason is in the way we organize our society, the way we organize our politics, the way we organize our government, and that can be addressed because we have the skills, we have the people, and we are not using those skills and those people to the benefit of the majority of the population.
What needs to die, I hear from you, is the way we are organized. And what needs to be born is taking advantage of the natural and human circumstances that we happen to have. Dr. Simutanyi will take a little break. And when we come back, I will ask what your Zambition is. Let's take a break.
Are you an entrepreneur looking for a place to work from? Do you want to develop your leadership skills? Do you have an idea or business you'd want to scale? Are you looking for a place to host training and learning events? If you answered yes to any of the questions, then Impactable Soccer is the place for you. It is a social innovation hub that is part of Impactable Global Network that supports various entrepreneurs and social innovators. Our services, among others, include co-working space, event hosting, incubation and acceleration programs, capacity building in leadership and business.
Welcome back. My name is Martin Kalungbanda, your host on Zambition. Our guest today is Dr. Neo Simutanyi. Dr. Simutanyi, what is your Zambition? What is your highest aspiration for Zambia?
Yes, that one is a very simple question. It's simple to me because I've always aspired to see a Zambia where no one goes without food, where no one sleeps hungry. I'm aware that there are many tens of thousands of Zambians who actually go without food. Poverty levels in this country remain exceedingly high. And again, I'm disappointed that that is the case. I look forward to a society where our levels of poverty should not only be below 50, like the MDGs were, or below 20. They should be negligible, almost negligible. This is the case in condemned countries, where you have a sharing society. And a sharing society is one where there is no want. People can get the basics of life, like education, health, social services, without paying for them. I would like to see a society after I'm gone, after even my children are gone, my grandchildren should be able to live in society where they don't need to know someone to get far in life, that they can actually progress based on their own abilities. Any aspiration I have is a society where people have full employment, at least where people are engaged in productive way, and they are creative. They are able to use their brains to contribute in any way, I mean, artistically or those intellectual, whatever it is. But all of us have our own gifts, and if those are exploited, that would really be useful. But of course, coming to politics, a question you asked me earlier, I would like a society where the political contestations taking place are civil, where we agree to disagree, and where where there's no violence. Democracy is about competition of ideas and competition to save. And I would like to see a situation where we give ourselves to citizens to select us based on our ideas, where there's contestation of ideas. And I think it is disappointing that while we fought very hard to do away with the one-party state, we have introduced it in a roundabout way. those who took over want to continue one-party state, but under a guise of multi-party. Because they don't want to leave office. They do everything possible to frustrate those who want to also have the opportunity to lead. And I think these are the disappointing things. That's why I talk about a democracy which is shallow. Shallow because it is devoid of participation. One person wants to dominate. There are so many of us, you know, and when you are given an opportunity to lead, you do your part and let others. First, important one, let other people. As it has been said, you know, people will die, but society won't die. You see, society is always there. Society is organic, but individuals die. So when we have the opportunity to contribute, we should just contribute and leave an impact. And leave. When time comes, we should go and let others also come. There's Kenneth Kaunda. Kenneth Kaunda is still around. You know, he has lived 30 years since he left office. He has still been around. This year, it marks 30 years since he left office. Kenneth Kaunda. In 97 years of this year, I think. But what has he learned? What he has learned, he has lived longer than he was in government. You see, his retirement is even longer than when he was president. And he has seen so much, of course, good and bad. But what it has shown is that it wasn't indispensable. It wasn't. There have been 4 other people since he left office who have been presidents of different quality, you know. The issue is not really, like I always say, it's not who is the best person to be the next president of Zambia. No.
Dr. Simutanyi, you are a political scientist. You have spent much of your professional life studying how societies, communities get and can choose to be organized. What explains this sometimes reality we see across the continent? People wanting to stay in power permanently.
It's difficult to explain. It has to do with there are many explanations, but it has to do with our traditional authority structures. We come from the village. To simplify it, we come from a village where we have a headman or a chief. Normally, a chief is a hereditary position. You know, person is made chief and becomes chief for the rest of their life. You know, once they're chosen chief, they rarely abdicate. That's how traditional authority structures are. We're used to that kind of system. But also, we reinforce it as who are subjects. I want to use Bamdani's because of the subject, because you see, we live in a democracy or in a republic, but we treat our leaders as if they are hereditary chiefs. So what happens is that we actually encourage them to continue in office. Why? Because when they're in office, we benefit. As long as those people are in the office that they hold, then I can keep my job. I can have those contracts. I can do those dirty deals as long as those guys are there. So removing them affects me. It affects those of us close to these people we put in office. And that's why the contestation is. If the person who is holding that office may not really want to continue in office. This is an African thing, but it should not be like that. We have constitutions which you can respect, but also we should respect other people's right to also have an opportunity to say.
Thank you. I just wanted to go slightly back to how you described your Zambition. The Zambia you want your children's children to live in. You mentioned 2 to 3 things that jumped out to me. That future Zambia must be one in which basic rights of food, health, education, freedom of speech are taken for granted. They are there.
Yeah.
But you also said one interesting element, that for as long as one is exercising their talent, they shouldn't depend on someone in order to get opportunities. And I found that really interesting. And the third point I picked was when you talked about what it takes when democracy is in place. Political contestation, and I'm using your words here, is for the purpose of serving society, not self.
Yes.
What will it take, Dr. Simutanyi, for us to be there?
Yeah, you see, philosophers like yourself, Karl Marx has said that philosophers have interpreted the world. They have said this is what should happen, could happen. But we should be able to do it ourselves, to change it. To interpret is one thing, but to actually practically bring about change is another. We have talked about change agents. I think you are involved in that kind of thing in your daily work. But in my view, that is more than that. It's more than you need a critical mass of people, of change agents who will not only understand what the problem is, but who will actually agree what the solution to the problem is. Whenever I'm in conversation with some of the leadership of our country, I find that we talk about the same things. We know the problem, but we already talk about the same problem. I don't know how many workshops, seminars have taken place on reducing poverty, on ensuring that there is access to health and education for all. I don't know how many seminars. More and more kids are in the streets with those seminars taking place. Why? Because we don't seem to know where the problem is. Today, as I speak, people are flashing lots and lots of money in Zambia. Where they get it from, no one knows. But amidst all this talk is privilege, pillaging, a few are taking advantage of the rest. And I think that's where the problem is. I've heard complaints coming from the highest office in the land that certain people are corrupt, certain people are thieves. But to know that somebody is a thief, is corrupt, is not the solution. That's not the institutions should be able to work and to clean society, but the institutions are manned by people who are themselves fallible.
From your studies, what comes first? Is it strong institutions that then make sure that the rules of how society plays out are properly implemented, or actually it is somehow stumbling on good leaders who then help those institutions to manifest the power, the strength that they should have? Or actually, no, it requires both. What have you learned?
For a long time, we've thought the problem with the lack of development, with corruption and all these things, was because of the absence of institutions. But the institutions we had were weak. So we need to create institutions, and we did create institutions. There have been so many institutions. I'll give an example of a political party. Political parties are institutions. They were created to facilitate a multi-party system. But these political parties have functions, which is to mobilize people, to sell manifestos, and so forth and so forth. But these political parties, which are institutions of democracy, are themselves undemocratic, because they are owned by their leaders as private property, as companies, limited liability company, LTD. So it is not the institution of a party which is the problem, but those who run it are to blame. And the issue now, I think, is how to get a cadre of leaders. They will come. It will take time. They will come. Who will make these institutions operate the way they should operate? It's not easy, but you need a start. And that's why some of us believe that if you have a leader at the top, chief executive, who understands what the role of that office, they will fashion the institution to operate according to a logic where they operate according to the norms for which they are established. And the moment they start doing that by example, they can make other institutions function.
I hear you, Dr. Simutanyi. Having good institutions is not good enough. We also need, in your language, a cadre of leaders who are willing to promote the capacity we have given to the institutions to play by the rules these institutions have been destined to play. A group of committed leaders who are willing to be subjected to the rules of the game.
Yeah.
As we conclude, Dr. Simutanyi, I would like to know, what is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've been given was from my own father. And he told me to be myself all the time. In other words, I should never pretend what I'm not. And to be human, to save. My father was a clinician. He was a clinical officer. So he saved people by treating them in hospital, regardless of their station in life. Well-off people and poor people. And he had many, many friends. Some of them very poor people were his friends. So he told me it was important to be of service to society, to help other people. And that is one lesson I've lived by throughout my life. That if I have the opportunity, I serve. The kind of work I do is work which is geared to serving others. It's simply to be simple. And that's how I live my life. Being simple and being of service to my fellow man.
Dr. Simutanyi, you have been my teacher. You remain my teacher. It's wonderful to talk to you, to learn from your wisdom. Thank you very much for appearing on Zambition.
Thank you very much, Martin. It has been my pleasure.
Having listened to the dialogue and followed my conversation with our guest, I now invite you to look at the drawing that emerged out of that dialogue. Take time to see the contours, the colors, the images that are reflected on the painting, on the drawing. And pay attention to what the drawing evokes in you. What are the feelings? What are the thoughts that are ignited by you looking at the painting? kindly share your reflections on this channel so that we can continue the dialogue on the future of the country we all love.